From health issues to finances to a general state of anxiety, 2023 has been a very difficult, painful year for a lot of people. Essentially, the year has been like a vice crushing them. What's interesting, though, is that with a few simple steps, the trap that we're now calling 2024 is very easy to escape.
I love the chase and the hunt, and I set the pace when I'm running. I always take what I want and I always give it 100. Don't need a bank, no, I'm funded. Play the game like it's nothing. I'm always thankful for something. Don't take for granted, stay humble. Now waiting, better believe in your mind, cause it's everything. You can mold, shape, find almost anything.
Hey everybody, this is Praxis. You ever notice at the end of the year, oftentimes people do kind of year-end summaries of what the year was like for them? Looking around here on this platform, I don't think that I've ever seen a year where there are more videos that have a title something along the lines of 2023 was the worst year ever. People talk about financial hardships, health issues, the state of the world. The overall arching theme of so many of the videos that I'm seeing is people's year-end wrap-up is that people had a really shitty time this year. Overall, people have had a lot of difficulties. What I want to say in this video is going to come off as sounding really crass, really callous, and it's going to sound like I'm blaming the victim. And I want to say before I even get into it that I don't mean it this way, because oftentimes when you talk about someone who's in a situation where they might be a victim of some sort of a situation or some other person, if you suggest that there are things that they can do to improve their situation, things that they could do to avoid this in the future, it gets a lot of people thinking, well, are you blaming me for being in this situation in the first place? And I want to elevate this conversation beyond the idea of blame, because blame doesn't really do anyone much good. Now, it's important to identify sources of issues for you because that's how we come up with solutions to address them. But if you just get to the blame part and then you don't take the next logical step after that, it kind of defeats the purpose of even identifying where the issue came from if you're not going to do anything about it. And that's what I want to talk about in this video, is that whatever your situation is, whether you have financial issues, health issues, you just have anxiety about the state of the world, there are almost always things you can do about it. And the reason I say almost always is that there are some circumstances where there just isn't anything you can do. In fact, a friend of mine right now, he's going through a lot of health issues that stem from genetic issues. That's something that none of us can do anything about. There are ways that we can try to compete against it, but sometimes issues like that just are overwhelming and there really isn't anything that you can do about it. But the majority of the time, people's issues don't fall into those categories. Usually people's issues fall into categories of situations that you actually have a lot of control over, but society has suggested to you that you don't have control over a lot of those situations, not for your benefit, but rather for the benefit of the society that's telling you that. And this really gets to the core of prepping, preparedness, and another word which I don't use much here on my channel, which is survivalism. The idea of surviving is inextricably connected with the idea that there are threats, there are dangers, and you either overcome them, survive, or you don't. And while a lot of people in our society have been trained to think that their ultimate fate really has nothing to do with themselves or their own decisions or their own actions in their life, and their ultimate fate really rests in the hands of some other person, the victimizer, the person that has put them in that situation, that sort of thinking doesn't really do them any good. It might be accurate that you've been victimized. It might be accurate that there's someone or some group or some sort of situation out there that has put you in a very unfair position. But that gets to the very nature of what it means to be in a survival situation. In nature, there's no sense of fairness. If you have a pack of wolves and you have a deer, the deer's only crime, the deer's only mistake is pretty much having existed in the first place. It's about to get predated upon by this pack of wolves. It's not the deer's fault. The deer is in a situation where this thing is happening to it. But there are decisions that deer can make in this situation, as unfair as it legitimately is for that deer. There are decisions that deer can make that situation either better or worse. The deer is not in a situation where it just has to accept its fate. And yet that, for people, is so frequently what we have been trained to do. We've been trained to identify where the unfairness is coming from and stop there and just let it continue to happen to us. And I see this reflected in the eyes and the faces of so many people who have created videos that I'm seeing here on this platform about 2023 being such a difficult, horrible, horrendous year. And again, I want to circle back to the idea that I mentioned at the beginning, that I don't mean any of this in a callous way. I don't mean this in an uncaring, heartless way where I'm suggesting that it's your own damn fault for being in whatever situation you're in. That may be true, that may be untrue, but whether it's true or not, it doesn't do you any good. And that's what I want to talk about in this video, is the idea of getting free, breaking free from things that are giving you pain and suffering and anxiety in your life. A lot of these things are discretionary. Our society has suggested to us that this is just the way that it is. Here's one example when I fell for this sort of a situation. It was a pre-COVID world where every single year I would get 1 or 2 colds and oftentimes a flu mixed in there. I've got a young boy, he plays with his friends, and every single year there were multiple weeks, probably adding up to over a month of sick time where I was dripping out of the face or feeling like, really terrible or whatever. I was sick for probably more than a month every year. And I didn't realize that that was discretionary. Because of my experience in society, I just thought that's just the nature of the world that we live in. Fast forward to COVID, and I started taking some actions trying to prevent myself from getting COVID during the early days when a lot of us didn't really know what the nature of it was. As it began to become clear to me that it was not the incredibly terrifying pandemic that a lot of us had been speculating that it might have been, it also became clear to me that, hey, these things that I'm doing, they're working for so many other diseases. And since the beginning of COVID, I haven't had a single sick day since for any of the cold and flu seasons that have passed. It was an illusion in my mind, the idea that I have to be sick every year. This is just something that happens. I can't do anything about it. I should just, be okay with that and just accept it. That was an illusion. And I was wrong about that. And there are a lot of illusions that I'm sure I still hold, and I know a lot of people in the world hold, where they just presume that this situation, this lot in life, this ordeal that we call 2023 or post 2020, the way you want to look at it, and it's been described so many ways by so many different people. I saw one video where the title was "Why We're All Dead Inside," and the first reaction that I had was, lady, speak for yourself. 2023 for me has been fine. And again, I'm going to cycle back. I don't want to sound heartless, but I do want to say that there are things that I do differently in my life that make it such that when situations arise in society that are frightening and difficult and dangerous for other people, because of decisions that I've made in my life, and some good luck and good fortune, of course, but because of decisions that I've made in my life, things that make years like 2023, the worst year ever for other people, are hardly anything to bat an eyelash at here. And again, the reason I bring this up isn't to rub this in anybody's face, but to suggest to anyone who's listening to this message still that there are things that you can do that can make your life different. They can take situations that are really horrible and difficult and dangerous for other people and make them so much more palatable to the point where you don't even notice that there is a situation. And so much of it, I think, gets back to the idea of prepping, preparedness, looking into the future, adjusting your lifestyle to try to meet challenges that are coming down the road. And one of the things that I do here in terms of financial issues, and I know financial issues are something that a lot of people are facing, is that I always try to live, quote unquote, below my means. And just that phrase itself makes you think that I'm I'm suffering through something and I could be living a comfortable life, but instead I'm living a very uncomfortable, painful life. But it's actually the opposite that's true. By stripping things out of my life that I don't need, things that I don't have to spend money on, and by spending money on it, I have to spend time working on them. By stripping a lot of that stuff out of my life, not only am I able to build kind of a padding for myself so that when tumultuous events happen, I have that padding there. But beyond that, stripping things out of your life that you can come to the conclusion that you don't need allows you to focus on the things that really actually are important in your life. My phone, it's more than 5 years old. I think it's like 7 or 8 years old. My computers, they're all old computers. When I have something that breaks around here, I try to fix it. I don't just toss out the broken one and take it as a welcome opportunity to upgrade to whatever is the new exciting thing that everybody else seems to be excited about. So going forward into 2024, head into it with that sort of a mindset in mind. Don't focus on whether you've been a victim or not. Don't focus on whether there's someone or something or some organization or some situation out there to blame. Look at the situation that you have in front of you and do the best with it that you possibly can. Because all the blame in the world, even if it is 100% appropriately placed, generally doesn't do you any good. The only thing that does do you good is getting clear vision on the way that the world really is, on coming up with a plan to try to meet the challenges that you see coming, and then executing that plan. Don't worry about the way that the world was. Certainly don't worry about the way that the world should be. Meet the world as it is. And if you can do that, in the future we can build the future that we like to think should be the future that we have. But if we always delude ourselves by convincing ourselves that whatever we think the world ought to be is the way that it has to be for us to be happy, then we're going to be in for a lot more of the worst year ever at the end of next year. I hope this message hits you in the way that it's intended, not as a way of trying to place blame on victims, but rather as a wake-up call for people to take responsibility for the levers of control that they can pull. Because there are always more opportunities to grab control of your own life than I think society wants us to believe. Because once we realize that we have a lot of control over our life, we don't live in as much fear, and if we're not living in as much fear as we were prior, we're not nearly as easy to control. And our lives benefit so immensely from that, from a lack of fear, from a lack of being manipulated, from a lack of feeling like you don't have autonomy in your own life. Yes, there are many situations where people are victimized. I'm sure that you and I are the victims of all sorts of situations here in the world which are very unfair, but that doesn't mean there's nothing we can do about it. That's it, and thanks for watching. Hey YouTube preppers, if you enjoyed this video, here's another one that I think you might like. But before you click on it, I wanted to take a moment to thank all the people on the right-hand side of your screen. They help to support all the work that I do here over at patreon.com. If you'd like to join them and get your name added to the list, the link's below.